All right, YouTube. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about the origins of progressivism here in the United States. Because the term progressive, the way it's used nowadays, it's a misnomer. So I just wanted to go ahead and clear up some of the confusion. The article that I'm citing is from the National Review. That's going to be in the in the description below. It's a really good article. I definitely recommend you read it if you're into that kind of thing. But basically, it talks about the history of progressivism and how Woodrow Wilson, Theodore Roosevelt were kind of the founders of it. And really what progressivism is using the function of government to essentially affect economic and social change. So that's obviously a very broad kind of like blanket term, I guess, because it's been used by both sides. It's been used by both the Democrats and the Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt, as you know, was a Republican. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat, and socially they both had very different views, but they were both progressives in the classical sense. Woodrow Wilson essentially, he got the United States government in bed with the Federal Reserve, so that was very progressive in the classical sense, getting the government to using the government to essentially affect, in this case, economic and monetary change, and he even admitted that he made a mistake by doing that. So that's unfortunate. That was an unfortunate, I guess, result of progressivism. Teddy Roosevelt, on the other hand, was someone who preserved the parks and everything, which I totally agree with. I mean, if you've ever been able to stroll one of the national parks here in California, it is absolutely breathtaking, folks. And yeah, I'm very thankful for people like Teddy Roosevelt for, he passed, I guess he was a very major proponent of some legislation or legislature, whatever the term is, that was passed that essentially preserved all the wildlife, or not the wildlife, but the parks and everything, which preserves the wildlife in a way, because you preserve their environment. Yeah, so it's been used by both sides, and it is, in historical context, the idea of progressivism is essentially big government. And a lot of people will argue that Trump is a progressive because that's actually what the article is about. The article is titled "Trump the Progressive," and they talk about Trump as a progressive in the sense that he is using his power in government to essentially, cause economic change. And the thing that you see him doing is basically ordering tariffs. I'm not really sure how that works, but I think it's like an executive order, I guess. I'm not sure, but either way, he has power to do it, and a lot of Democrats are behind him. So, and they're only behind him because it's more tax dollars for the government to rake in. So, but he's doing it for a good reason, not to rake in tax dollars, but essentially, I think what he's doing is he's discouraging buyers from buying Chinese products, and also discouraging, I guess, Chinese exporters from importing their things into our country. I'm not sure, but obviously it's part of the trade war. But that is a progressive aspect of Trump. He's using that, the function of government, to do things like that. And also, he's initiated the travel ban. The Supreme Court, I guess, backs him on that. The travel ban is economic and social. The social aspect is that he's essentially blocking off travel from very prominent Muslim countries, despite Saudi Arabia and Turkey being major breeding grounds for terrorism, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Essentially, he's blocking the countries, I guess, that have weaker security, so he's, I guess, helping them out with their job. But, not letting them get on planes and coming over to the United States and doing, God knows what. And that's happened, you've seen that with the guy that fucking ran over pardon my French, they ran over all those people in Central Park, and then the subway bomber. I think he only injured one person. The bomber did. The truck driver, absolute coward in my mind. I mean, he killed like over a dozen people. I think it was horrible. Yeah, and yeah, it was definitely ISIS. I mean, ISIS even warned about it. But anyways, the travel ban, that kind of in a ways that is a social he's trying to affect social change using the function of government. And going back a little ways, going back to Woodrow Wilson, he is a democratic progressive, getting the United States associated with the Federal Reserve. I mean, we're locked to the hip with these folks, unfortunately, and there's no transparency or anything. So that's obviously something that has to change, and I'm wondering if Trump will be the president to at least start the conversation about that. I think he will. But Woodrow Wilson, on the other hand, socially, in the social aspect, was a outspoken racist. And maybe not even that. Maybe he was just a proponent for segregation. I think that could be speculated whether he was racist or not. But he certainly said that he was pro-segregation. He was a Democrat. And, he was kind of very favored among the Southerners, the Southern Democrats. So progressivism, and it carried over to guys like George Wallace, and then there's another guy named, what's his name, Bill, I think his name is Bilbo Theodore Bilbo, one of the two. But, these folks were basically segregationists. George Wallace, as you know, he was a governor, I think it was the state of Alabama, and he got shot. I think he was actually going to run for president. I think he was probably inspired by Woodrow Wilson and decided to run for president, and he got shot. So, which I don't think is right. I don't agree with his politics, but that's just another example of fascism, in my opinion. Suppressing your opponent with violence, and that's what happened there. But I do agree with this article in a lot of ways that Trump is a progressive in that sense, and my idea of progressivism, that's classical progressivism, talking about Teddy Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, George Wallace, the other guy, Bilbo, I forgot his name. But those are classical progressives. I consider myself in a lot of ways, and I consider Trump to be in a lot of ways, a neo-progressive. And maybe that term makes sense to folks, but the way it makes sense to me is like, yeah, we're gonna understand that the function of government can be used to affect economic and social change, but we do not want to abuse our power. We essentially want to use it for the bare necessities, and if we can do that, then we've essentially done our job. We can reduce the size of government while still being progressives. That, in my mind, I guess embodies neo-progressivism. So that was a pretty good take. I'm going to end on that. I like this topic. This is a very interesting topic for me. And just one more note. I just want to go ahead and say that these progressive, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but these progressives, the self-proclaimed progressives, you might even call them neo-progressives because the term neoconservative is used in a very, in my opinion, a disparaging fashion. So I would hate that because I like that term. I want to assign that term to myself, neo-progressive. That's a cool term. But maybe these folks are faux progressives or classical progressives. In a lot of ways, that might be the case because I forgot to mention that these progressives, George Wallace included, the classical progressives, believed in very high taxes. They believed in social programs. They believed in like anti-monopoly, which is along the lines of Trump. He definitely spoke up when it came to Warner Media and definitely talking about Jeff Bezos and Amazon and kind of how that's in his mind screwing over the postal service. So they're anti-monopoly. And basically like anti-right to work, which whatever that means. I'm sorry, I'm a little ignorant of that term, but I know it's definitely something that Trump is a proponent of. But these progressives nowadays would have a lot in common with guys like Woodrow Wilson and George Wallace in their own context, because it seems like modern day progressives, these so-called liberals, are very pro-segregation. They believe in like cultural appropriation, which sounds a lot to me like segregation. Just my opinion. And in my opinion, these classical progressives that are, hey, maybe it's not a misnomer. Maybe they are the true classical progressives, and we're the neo-progressives, us Trump supporters, because we have in a lot of ways, we believe in using the function of government to achieve what we want, to make America great again. But we do not want to. We do not want the government to overstep its boundaries, which I hope I think that I hope that Trump is trying his damnedest to do this. Sorry, I got my tongue tied there. But anyways, yeah, let me know what you guys think. It's a very interesting topic. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'm trying to do more videos like this where I'm, I guess, rambling, but I wanted to try and at least start the discussion about these things because, hey, it's interesting. And, hell, I'll go ahead and own that term, neo-progressive, so, I might even change my channel name. I don't know. I like this name too, so, yeah. God bless, guys. I'll see you later.